Father, we're all in different parts, different journeys, but all towards the same goal. And all towards the same place in the end. Wherever we're at, the joys of the season or the pains of the season, help us to trust you more today, to turn our eyes on you. And this morning as we come together and join in unity and as the church, I pray that we're an encouragement to one another. That we take our eyes off of ourselves and be willing to put in the extra mile to encourage somebody next to us or to laugh with them or to cry with them. Father, let us be the hope on earth. We thank you for that. All right, before we go into worship here, I just wanted, if you guys would stand to your feet, please. I just want to take a moment and just breathe. I think sometimes we can get a little bit bogged down by a week, or even a weekend, or even a morning. When you got, like my little daughter, she can be quite a handful. And sometimes you just need to take a big breath. So I just want to take a moment, just take a big breath in, and just let go of the week. We are here right now. Let's be present, and let's worship our Father. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. While shepherds kept their watching o'er silent flocks by night, behold, throughout the heavens there shone a holy light. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. The shepherds feared and trembled when low above the earth rang out the angel chorus that hailed the Savior's birth. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Down in a lowly manger, the humble Christ was born, and sent salvation, their blessed Christmas morn. Go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. That Jesus Christ is, one more time, that Jesus Christ is born. Amen.
To certain poor shepherds in fields shepherds as they lay in fields where they lay keeping their sheep on a cold winter's night that was so deep. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. They looked up and saw a star shining in the east beyond them far, and to the earth it gave great light, and so it continued both day and night. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. Then let us all with one accord sing praises to our heavenly Lord, that have made heaven and earth not, and with his blood mankind has brought. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. Noel, 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 Noel. Born is the King of Israel. Born is the King of Israel.
Love incarnate, love divine. Sovereign angels gave the sign. Bow to babe on bended knee, the Savior of humanity. Unto us a child is born, he shall reign forevermore. Noel, Noel, come and see what God has done. Noel, Noel,
This morning, Ron asked me to. I thought I was. I'm sorry. Ron asked me to do the Advent candle this morning, and the theme is joy today. And wait, here comes another mic. Am I doing something wrong? Oh, he had his mouth on it. Good morning. I'm sure this ain't the way this was supposed to turn out, but today I was asked to do the Advent candle on joy. And with that, I know that at Christmas time, everybody doesn't experience the joy of the Lord. So I'm going to ask Reese's to come up here and help me light this candle. And between the two of us, but after that, I'm going to ask you, oh, Mom's going to help. Sweet. You light the pink one right here. Candle lighter. Look at that, like a professional. Thank you, thank you. With that being said, I do thanks, Tracy. There are people in our community, in our congregation, who are not enjoying the joy of the Lord. So I'm going to ask you to take about 10 seconds and silently pray for those who are struggling at this time of year. Do that.
All right. If you are new to Mosaic, first off, welcome. What we do right now is we're going to take a 10-minute break. This is our walk across the room. It's get to know somebody that you haven't met before. Have some coffee in the back. I know that there are some cookies being sold for one of our ministries in the back as well, Outliers, which I'm excited for. And then the question for today to ask somebody, if you're looking for something, is... what is your favorite Christmas dinner meal? Ooh, there we go. That should start some conversation. All right. See you back here in 10 minutes. Let's go to our first song. 1, 2, 4.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys head back to your seats, we're going to get the sermon started, get the announcements going for you guys to see what's coming up. So make sure you guys head back to your seats, grab that last bit of coffee, and we'll see you soon. Right, all right, here we go. Well, good morning, Mosaic Church. I hope everybody had the chance to get their coffee and everything, get your haircuts soon. I mean, between Carlton and Walt over here, man, I'm like, man, am I missing something? Do I need to go get a haircut too? Well, I hope you guys were actually thinking about what Carlton said. What's your favorite dish and everything that we get to do? Mine is my grandmother's apple crisp. It's a simple recipe that I'm never going to tell anyone because it's my secret. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you guys for coming here to Mosaic Church. We absolutely love to be able to see you guys here today and see all the smiling faces and try not to think about the cold weather ahead, right? Well, here at Mosaic Church, we do have a couple of ways for you guys to give. We have a new online presence here, mosaicva.com/giving. Feel free to go ahead and download that app. Go ahead and donate that way. We also have that black mailbox right as you walked into the door. Feel free to donate that way. And we'll see where all that good money goes to, right? All this nice, pretty decorations. I just can't get over it. It's awesome. We have a couple of things that are not on these slides. So before I get to the slides here, Ben and Lisa have a friend that are moving. So if you guys can actually help out, they need help offloading a truck, right? So if you can get to Ben and Lisa for that point of contact, you have it today. So like today, feel free. Get in contact with them to offload that truck, all right? It's just something we got to do. We also have a care portal. We have a family in need that needs to offload. They had a couch and love seat that needs to be offloaded too. Gail's the point of contact for that, so make sure you guys talk to Gail for that one. All right. Now getting back to the slides here, let's see, we have the Christmas Eve service. Remember, Christmas Eve is on Saturday today, or this week, so this Saturday, coming Saturday, make sure you guys come to that service. There will be no Sunday service because of the Christmas Eve service that we're going to have here, so just keep that in mind. If you show up here on Sunday, great job. Hopefully you got here on time, but nobody's going to be here, all right? But make sure you guys come over to the Christmas Eve service on Saturday. That's going to be from 4:30 to 5:30 right here at Mosaic Church. And then, guys, next year, yes, I can't believe I'm saying that. Next year, we're going to be having the Forge, the first Forge. We're going to have pizza and dessert brought to you by the Men's Forge group right here, where we guys get together. Yeah. It's almost like that Tim Allen there, right? I had to get that in there. I'm sorry. But yeah, we have the Forge coming up, so we got pizza and desserts. It's going to be on January 5th, so make sure if you have any more information, feel free to go to the church app, or you can talk to me and Zach, and we'll get you guys squared away to come over here. It's going to be at 6 p.m. right here at Mosaic Church. All right, so for the next thing we got is the church administration. We still have that. Please feel free to put in an application for it. We'd like to draw from our own community right here at Mosaic because, we already kind of know what everything's going on with everybody kind of helping out and how the pace goes here at Mosaic Church. So feel free to look at that, put in an application, and we'll get you guys taken care of from there. All right. I also want to put out one more thing here is just go ahead and pray for all the people that are not feeling too well and that are traveling. I know my wife's at home. Hi, honey. Somewhere in Cyberland over there looking on the app. If you guys are sick, feel free to look on the app because we do live streaming on there too. So just make sure you guys pray for everybody that is not feeling under the weather, and also pray for the people that will be traveling throughout this week and next week. Just keep them in mind, keep them in your prayers, make sure they get safe travels, and hope that they feel better, very soon. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and bring up Walt, who's going to give the sermon today. So let's go ahead and put your hands together for Walt.
Thanks, bro. Thanks, Scott. It's warmer up here. It's a little chilly. As Scott said, if I haven't had a chance to meet you, maybe you're newer in the fellowship. My name is Walt Davis, and my family and I, we come down once or so a month to help, to serve the wonderful saints here. This is a really special place, man. I don't know too many places where the worship leader has the freedom one week to have a weird ponytail thing, and then the next week to not have his shoes on, this is a really cool place. I love Carlton. But it's just a really neat place. Certainly if we lived closer, or we live in Charlottesville, if we lived closer, we would certainly love to fellowship more often, with you guys. So it's just a neat place. So if you're visiting for the first time, what I would say is the most special thing about this fellowship is the desire amongst the fellowship to truly be a fellowship, to care for the needs of one another. Does this church do it perfectly? Of course not, because no church is perfect in all regards. But the desire to really be the hands and the feet of Jesus, to really be to one another, as Paul talks about the imagery, the arm and the leg, and supporting one another to build up this body, to edify this local fellowship. It's just really exciting and really encouraging. I love the elder team and how they seek to lead as a true plurality of elders, sharing the responsibility of leadership. It's very often that leadership can get so stifled through a single individual. Not always, but it can. And to see the fellowship here truly share that leadership and to continue to encourage the saints to do the work of the ministry as opposed to quote-unquote paid professionals. It's really cool. I really love to see it, and I pray for God's best for you in the days to come. So we are going through this Advent time, which is an appropriate time to do it, right before Christmas comes, just 1 week from today. So husbands, be warned, 1 week from today. You've got a few days to make things happen, okay? So the Advent, it's the word Advent just simply means, coming, all right? We have the first Advent, we have a second Advent. And what's really cool about this Advent season is, yes, we certainly celebrate the first coming of the Lord. We do, and we make a big deal about it because we're going to talk about it today, because it changed the course of human history. I mean, in fact, the writer of Hebrews says that the death of Christ, which obviously came after the birth of Christ, he had to be born before he died, was the culmination of the ages. So often, I have had thought that the culmination of the ages is something yet future, like at the second coming or something, that's when things really get going. Like that's the climax. But the writer of Hebrews says, no, that the culmination of the ages was actually at the death of the Christ, because that's when the ending of the old covenant happened, and the inauguration of a new covenant, of a new way to relate to the Lord through this union with Christ. And so we celebrate the first coming. We look forward to the second. Again, Hebrews, he says that, he talks about the culmination, like I just said. What's really cool, it's like the last verse of chapter 9, I think. In Hebrews, he says, listen, when Jesus returns, so talking about the second advent, right, the second coming, when he returns, he will return with no regard towards sin, but to eagerly, to rescue those who eagerly are waiting salvation. So that passage just jumps off the screen to me, or the page, if you're reading on a page, that his second coming, he will come with no regard to sin. He won't even think about it. He won't talk. He'll have no regard to sin at his second coming. And that makes me think, why? Like, why? Because I, growing up a very religious individual, I always thought, that in the future, is that what you want to be doing when Jesus comes back? That whole stuff, right? Like this fear, this condemnation, like, hey, Jesus is coming, you better shape up, right? Or he's going to ship you out, like this concept. But when he returns, according to Scripture, he returns with no regard to sin. Why? How's that possible? Well, church, it's because his first coming, his first advent, he came in regard to what? Sin. And he paid it in full. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. When he hung there on the cross, so we'll see it actually a passage in Matthew here in a little bit. When he hung on the cross, before he gave up his spirit, because they didn't take it, remember? Nobody can take my life, but I'll lay it down. Before he gave up his spirit, before he died, he cried what? It is finished. And that, church, we celebrate. God's reckoning, God's counting of sins is finished. That's what we mean when we say the finished work of the cross, the finished work of Christ. He is done counting sins because he has counted them all against his very own Son in his death. And so now what is the second coming a celebration of? He comes to eagerly gather those who are waiting salvation, because the sin issue is done with. We now live in this new covenant. We live in this new life, joined to him, one with him in the new covenant. And so we celebrate this time of year. We make a big deal about it, as we should. But, I don't think we make a big deal about it only during December. We make a big deal about what he did in his first coming all the time, right? We make a big deal about what he's doing when he comes the second time all the time. But we focus in this time of December to hone in on some exact elements of his coming, of his first coming. We've talked about Jesus being bringing peace. We talked about that last week or week before, I forget. This week, we're talking about Jesus being the light of the world. And in his first coming, he actually brings light into darkness that is mind-blowing. We'll see it in a second. But Christmas and lights, Christmas and lights go together like what? Like fried and Spam, right? I mean, they go together. You can't have Christmas without lights these days. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine us not having, you guys don't have fried Spam at your place? Like, dude, neither do we. I don't know where that came from. You imagine these lights, all right? You have these Christmas trees up here. What if we just turn these lights off? I mean, it's cool. There's now just trees randomly in the building, which is kind of odd. Have you ever thought about how that started? Like, imagine you being an alien that just got deposited to planet Earth, and you walk in the door right here, and you see vegetation, like full-grown vegetation. These are artificial, I suppose, but full-green vegetation inside of a building. Inside I just think that's odd. Like, I don't know. I just think it's very odd. We do it. We have trees at our house, but like, why? I really don't know. But anyways, it's hard to imagine Christmas without lights. At our house on Christmas Eve, we always go, as soon as the sun goes down, so we have dinner on Christmas Eve, we get in the car and we drive around the neighborhoods just to see the what? The lights. The last couple of years, we've gone to Richmond to some place, I don't remember the name of it, but it's really cool if you want to go. It's got, like, I don't know, gazillions of lights. Do you know the name of it? Some sort of botanical garden. Dude, it's incredible. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. But it is lights upon lights upon lights upon lights. Let's just say you go to that place and they turn the lights off. Not so special, right? Not so special. So Christmas and lights go together. Like it's hard to imagine Christmas today, especially in the West, in America, without lights. Well, I think it's incredibly satisfying that 2,000 years ago, at the first Christmas, light burst into darkness. See, we have to remember where the world was 2,000 years ago. See, we've grown up, a lot of us, many of us, either in church or close enough to the church scene where we kind of, forget, honestly, about what it's like to be a life before Christ, before Jesus came into the world. We've got to realize that, I shared this several weeks ago, that the big picture about how in the garden, when the rebellion from the spiritual world entered into the physical world, when as Ezekiel calls it, the great rebel cherub of Eden came and deceived Eve, deceived Adam, and brought this deception that was already existing in the spiritual realm into the physical realm, that broke fellowship, that broke union, that broke togetherness with God, to where they were now walking around hiding, looking for leaves to cover the nakedness. And they were separated from God immediately. And then generations pass, you get to Genesis 6, and it gets even worse, where the sons of God look at the daughters of men and decide to marry them and intermarry the spiritual world and the physical world in Genesis 6. And now you have these Nephilim giants who are destroying things, and men of great renown, and it's a terrible place of darkness in this world. Darkness started at the garden, and darkness got darker in Genesis 6 with the Nephilim. And then you get, like we talked about several weeks ago, all the way to Genesis 11, just the first 11 chapters. You get the darkness getting darker and darker when God placed the sons of God over top of the nations that he divided the Tower of Babel, and these sons, these B'nai Elohim, these angelic beings that are supposed to reflect God to the nations, they start demanding their own worship by the nations, and now we have all these false gods being worshipped by the nations, and God has disinherited the entire nation, the entire world, the entire people in Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel. And you talk about dark upon what? Dark. It was dark. And yet he made a promise to this man Abraham that one day there would be a seed that would come that would restore what was broken, restore this darkness. But do you remember what happened on that very first day of creation? Genesis I don't know. I always mess this thing up. There we go. Genesis 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And look at this. The earth itself was without form and void. And look, darkness. This is before creation. Darkness was over the face of the deep. Now, if you were to ask me, Walt, what was happening prior to day one of creation, my answer would be, I don't know. I wasn't there. It doesn't say here what was happening before the first day of creation, but except that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So before day one of creation, there was darkness, there was earth of some sort, and there was waters before day one of creation. When were those created? I don't know, but I know who created it. Okay? But then God said, verse 3, let there be light. The very first day of creation was light bursting forth through the darkness. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day and he called the darkness night. So the very first act of creation that we have recorded in the Bible was God creating this thing that he identified as light. Now, this is before human beings. This is before plants. This is before even stars. This is before even the sun was created. The sun wasn't even created until day, 4? But on day 1, he's creating light. Where is the source of this light? Where is this light coming from? I think those are great questions. He doesn't answer it. He doesn't specifically say, but I think I know. Because probably about 7,000, 8,000 years later, Jesus himself came into the world. And think about just how dark the world was before creation. Darkness covering the earth, the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, and you couldn't see your hand if there weren't hands created yet, but if there were, you couldn't see it in front of your face, that darkness. In the very first act of creation, God created light. And light, can you imagine it bursting on the scene? Carlton was talking about this beautiful sunrise this morning. I submit that the most beautiful of sunrises that we've ever seen, whether at the beach, in the mountains, wherever, pale in comparison to that first day of creation, where for the first time ever that we know of, light burst forth into darkness. But you see, it wasn't just the first day of creation that God created light out of darkness, or where there was darkness. See, day 1 of creation, I think, was a foreshadowing of another day 1 that was coming. The first day of this new day, this new covenant, this new reality. John, in his gospel, writes, in the beginning was the Word, okay? That's what he calls Jesus, the Word, the Logos. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So Jesus and God, you can't separate them. Distinguishable, but inseparable. And he, Jesus, the Word, was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him. So Jesus was the one who was making day 1 of creation, the light through the darkness. Day 2 of creation. Day 3, it was Jesus who was creating. All things that were made through him. And without him, nothing was made that was made. It's all through him. And in him was life. Now look at this. And the life was, look at that, the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Oh, gosh, sorry. My knee. I've got an MRI tomorrow. I got to be careful. I've got a meniscus issue going on. That really hurt. Give me a second. So, light burst forth through the darkness on day 1 of creation, and now John is picking up on that and say, hey guys, there's a light bursting through darkness again. And this time the darkness isn't just darkness covering the earth as it was on the first day of creation. This darkness is a spiritual darkness, a spiritual blindness, a darkness that's caused by the rebellious heavenly beings that penetrated into the world and at the garden with the serpent and Eve and Adam, and then in Genesis 6, like we talked about, with the Nephilim, and then in Genesis 11, with the rebellion of the people and the creation of the nations and the rebellion of the sons of God that were placed over them, according to Deuteronomy 28. And so this darkness that has permeated the entire world, not physically, because there's a sun that governs by day and a moon by night, but there's a darkness spiritually over the world. And in this darkness, the day finally came for light. Jesus himself, to burst through the darkness. There was a man sent by God whose name was John, John the Baptizer, and he came as a witness, to bear witness about the light, to tell people about the light, but he wasn't the light himself, but a bearer of witness about the light. Here you go, verse 9. The true light, which gives light to everyone, has come into the world. Now, we'll see later, John specify everyone. It's everyone who believes, but he has provided this light to all man, to all mankind. And so just as that first day back in creation with total utter darkness, and God himself, God the Father and the Son, in coordination and unity says, let there be light. That day, day one, a foreshadow of a greater day that would come, when in the darkness of humanity, the darkness of sin, the darkness of depravity, the darkness of rebellion, light would be brought forth. Now, John goes on to say that the darkness did not receive it, did not understand it, couldn't perceive it. But nevertheless, the light shone in the darkness. Later on in Jesus' ministry, Jesus calls himself the light. He says in John 8, he says, behold, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in this darkness, but will have the light of life. I don't know if you do this. We at our house upstairs, we have these little night lights, right? There's one in the bathroom. I think we have one in the hallway. I try my best not to get up in the middle of the night as best as I can. But there's these little lights in the hallway and in the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the hall bathroom for the kids. Why? Because if they get up in the middle of the night, we don't want them to what? Stumble and fall, right? We only need one meniscus tear at a time, right? In our house. And so we give them light that they can see and avoid, trappings and difficulties and stubbed toes, etc. Oh, don't get me started on stubbed toes. We've all been there, right? It's. I'm glad our kids are older and the toys are becoming less numerous on the ground, Legos that you step on. But our dog has these toys, and they blend into the floor, and we step on them, all of us. And I'm like, why do we keep these toys around? Because they hurt. And that's even with light. But they just blend in so well. But when we have light, if we use the light, if we're paying attention, it allows us to see where we're going. If the lights were shut off, this is not, you didn't come to church to learn this morning, but if these lights were off and I was trying to get from here to that tree, I would struggle navigating through all this stuff up on the stage. But as soon as the light comes on, guess what? I can now see what's around me. I can see the reality that I couldn't see before. When Jesus came and he brought light, the light of life, it revealed a big thing, the death of the human heart, the darkness, the depravity of the human heart. And remember how the religious Jews were so proud of themselves, trying to say that they themselves were able to satisfy the requirements of the law in order to, and therefore okay with God. And that's when Jesus hammers them with the Sermon on the Mount. And I know I've mentioned this before, but they say, oh, you've heard it said, Jesus says, thou shalt not commit adultery. And they're, all proud of themselves, But I want to make sure you understand what that means. If you even have lust in your heart, you're guilty. Ooh. Who's righteous now? And so the light illuminating shows reveals the true condition of their heart and their need for something bigger, something better, something life-transforming. And that actually is Jesus, as he says, he is the light of life. You have the darkness of death, and I am the light of life. Philip says to him in John 14, this is so cool to me. He says, Philip says to him, Lord, show us the Father, this is a long debate, long discussion in John 14, and they're like, if you would just show us the Father, then we would really believe and all this sort of stuff, right? John 14. And so Philip, in the middle of this conversation, says, just show us the Father, and that's enough. Like, if you would just peel back, the portal between this world and the kingdom of heaven, and that the Father himself would illuminate this place, that would be enough for us. And Jesus is kind of indignant. Look at how he responds. This is, the Prince of Peace here, right? Jesus, he says, how long have I been with you so long and you still don't know me, Philip? It's been 3 some years. This is just hours before his arrest. You don't know me? And this is what he says, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. And he goes on to talk about how, because I and the Father are one. So I want you to get this. What does light illuminate? Light not only illuminates the obstruction in the way, the problems that I have to get where I'm going, but the light also illuminates what? The thing I'm going what? To. And so Jesus says, coming into this world of darkness, see, not only did we, humanity, not know what was in our way, the true condition of our heart, of our deceit, our wicked, dead spiritual heart, but we didn't even really know where we were going. We didn't know the goal. We thought, as they did, that the goal was just religious activity. If we could just check off these 613 laws and rules to do, then that's obviously where we're going. That's where that's our destination, just mere obedience to laws and rules and commands. But Jesus is, I hear him saying, not only me bursting into this darkness reveals the condition that you could never in a million years make your way to God, but my light, the light of life that I'm bringing into this world, also reveals the Father himself. Because if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. So what do you know about me, Philip? This isn't how 14 continues, but I'm just, imagining. What do you know about me, Philip? I see Philip scratching his head like, well, there was that one time when that woman was caught in adultery. It was thrown in front of everybody. I mean, she was pulled out of the bed, thrown in front of everybody. And you get down, you write some stuff, on the ground, and then you stand up and you just simply say, he who is without sin, cast the first stone. So if you have seen me, you have seen the Father. For I and the Father are one. Philip, what do you know about me? Well, we were in that boat, and we thought we were dead and gone. But all of a sudden, you stood up and you calmed the seas, and immediately we were at the other side of Galilee. So you and the Father have complete control over this stuff that trips us out, freaks us out. Philip, what do you know about me? Well, there was this time when we were so hungry, and there were thousands and thousands of people who were so hungry. And you looked with great compassion over all the people, and you fed them so much that there were 12 baskets left over. Philip, if you have seen me, you've seen the Father. The heart of the Father is seen in the face of Jesus Christ himself. I am the light of the world to illuminate the inability of you, humanity, to be made right with God on your own, but I'm also illuminating the true face of the Father before you. You see, if we didn't have Jesus, we wouldn't know the Father. If we didn't see Jesus, we wouldn't know what the Father is like. A couple weeks back, we talked about the covenant that God made before Abraham. And Paul in Galatians, do you remember this? Paul says that this covenant was actually made to the seed, singular, and that seed is who? Do you remember? Jesus, yes. And so God the Father and God the Son were making a covenant that day back in Genesis 15. And we talked about how the animals were cut in half, and I brought the little boy through the animals. You guys were with us during that time. If not, check out the podcast, because I don't have time to reteach the whole thing. But normally, the two parties would walk through the cut-up animals and basically say, if I go back on my end of the bargain, then you can cut me up like we cut up these animals. Remember this? Well, did Abraham go through the animals? No, he was what? Asleep over on the side, doing nothing but believing. But there were two things that went through. And I put it on the screen so that we could read it together. There were two things that went through those animals. Look at this. When the sun had gone down, Abraham was asleep over on the side. It was dark. So if it's dark, you cannot. Okay, we're good. We're good. You're with me. I know that's life-changing. Well, it was dark, so therefore you cannot see. Behold, look at this, a smoking pot, a smoking fire pot, and a flaming torch passed between these pieces of animals, making this covenant. Now, if it's dark, imagine with me. If it's dark, so if a smoking fire pot, you have a pot and the smoke is coming out of it, but the pot is covering the flame. You don't see the flame. It's in the pot. So there's flame. There's smoke billowing out of it, but you don't see the flame. And if it's dark, follow me. If it's dark, can you see the smoking pot at all? So that was a little weird sounding. Can you see the smoking pot? Can you see this pot that is smoking? That sounds weird too. Can you see the smoking fire pot in Genesis 15? If it's dark, can you see it? The answer is no, it's dark. You can't see smoke in the dark. You got me? It's dark. Smoke itself doesn't give off light. With me? So how were they able to see the smoking pot, the smoking fire pot? There was also what? A flaming torch. A flaming torch and the smoking fire pot that passed through these animals. And I'm submitting to you that these objects, it's Old Testament typology, that these objects were pictures of the Father, the smoking fire pot. You cannot see him. You cannot see him and live. But the only way you can see him is because there was a flaming torch, the light of the world, that illuminated him as they passed through the animals. And this is what Paul picks up on in Galatians 3 that I taught on several weeks ago, that the Father made a covenant with the Son that day. And Abe is a part of this covenant by what? Faith, by believing. He didn't go through it. And so the Father makes covenant with the Son in Genesis 15. These two objects, the smoking fire pot, you cannot see on its own, but you can see the flaming torch, and the flaming torch gives light so that you can see the smoke bellowing out of this pot. Do you see it? And so Jesus, as the light of the world, he not only illuminates the darkness, like dispels the darkness so that we can see the trappings that we have found ourselves in as sons and daughters of Adam and Eve, but he actually illuminates for us the very heart of the Father, who has made covenant with himself, saying that we will do both ends of the bargain, God's role and man's role, because I will become a man and I will die a perfect sinless life so that all who just sleep and believe will receive the inheritance of my Spirit in them. Do you see it? I am the light of the world. So how does the light of the world, who has been the light, I think ever since day one of creation, when God said, let there be light, and I think it's the light of God himself, because there's no sun, there's no S-U-N yet. The light of God himself radiates, bursting forth into the darkness. And we see little images like we see here in Genesis 15. We see little images of it throughout to where ultimately John, as we just read, the apostle, John the disciple, John the beloved, he writes beautifully that the light of life has now come into this world, dispelling darkness. How does this light become our light? How does our darkness in our heart get dispelled by this light? Here's what's awesome to me, guys. Here's what's so cool. The light itself, Jesus, had to what? Die. He had to pay your penalty and mine. The light of the world had to go out. What do we read in Matthew, in Luke, and in Mark? Either Mark or John. It's not in all four. What do we read happens on the night, the day during Jesus' crucifixion? Darkness. Now from the 6th hour, that's noon, from the 6th hour, noontime, from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all of the land until the 9th hour. The 9th hour, that's 3 p.m. Noon to 3, darkness. I say that's a little odd, wouldn't you? The light of the world is dying on a Roman cross for you and for me. So that, and we'll get to it in a second, I'll get ahead of myself, so that the darkness of our heart that we got from Adam would be dispelled, and the light of life himself would now come and live in us, with us, in the new heart. Darkness all over the land until the 9th hour. And about the 9th hour, at the end of this darkness, Jesus cries out with a loud voice saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And some of the bystanders hear it. Okay, this just goes to show the darkness of man. They say, this man's calling Elijah. And some of them run and they get a sponge and they fill it with sour wine. They put it on a reed, a stick, and they give it to him to drink. And others say, hey, let's wait and see whether Elijah will come and save him. I mean, they're like got the popcorn trying to make it into a show when the light of the world is going out so that his light can come in. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice. In another translation or other accounts, gospel accounts, is where he says, it is finished. Matthew just doesn't record that. And he yielded up his spirit. Now look at this. The light of the world has extinguished. The light of the world is dead, paying in his death the sin of the world. And behold, the curtain of the temple in that moment was torn in two from top to bottom. Now, what's this curtain all about? Quickly, our time is leaving. The curtain in the temple separated the most holy of holies from the rest of the temple and rest of the system. And there was only one person who was allowed to go beyond that curtain. One person, how many times a year? One. One person, one time of a year, was allowed through scores and scores of sacrifices and sprinklings of blood to try to cover sins. He went beyond the veil to cover remember what was inside the veil? The Ark of the Covenant, right? To sprinkle blood over sorry, my lower tab is speaking. But the mercy seat, the Ark of the Covenant. And do you know what was on top of the Ark of the Covenant? It was two what? Two seraphims, and they were staring down at the mercy seat. And what was he sprinkling one time a year all over the mercy seat? Blood. So that the angels who were the mediator of that first covenant, staring down, what was inside? What was inside of the ark? the tablets written on, the stone tablets with the 10 Commandments written on stone. And instead of those angels being able to see the guilt and the condemnation of man, there was layer upon layer upon layer of blood that was applied to the top of that box that was called the mercy seat, so that the righteous wrath of God was not poured out upon the Israelites during those days of old, but it was banked, it was stored up, so that the righteous Lamb of God, when he would come, and his sacrifice was offered on the cross of Calvary, there would be no more veil. There would be no more one time a year. There would be nothing that separates us from the very presence of God in the holies of holies. In the very death of Jesus, the moment when darkness covered all the land, in his death and his sacrifice for the sins of the world, the Holy of Holies moved out and covered the world, the earth. Because sin, once and for all, Hebrews says, was removed. Can you see it? On that cross. That's why Hebrews calls the cross the culmination of the ages. Because the penalty for sin was paid in full, not by Abraham or a descendant of Abraham, but by the Father and the Son himself, becoming a man in the person of Jesus and taking on the sin of the world. He who knew no sin, what? Became sin. The light of the world became the darkness of your heart that you were born with in Adam. Why? So that we might become the righteousness of God. You see, God, the light of the world, Jesus Christ, became darkness on that cross so that we who believe might become his righteousness, might be the light with him in the world. And this is exactly how Paul says it in 2 Corinthians 4:6. He says, let light shine out of darkness. He has shone in our hearts to give the light of knowledge, the reality of the glory of God. We can now see it because of the light of God, and we behold it in the very face of Jesus Christ. And that's what I was saying earlier, that because of Jesus and because what he has done and because of who he is and the life that he lived, we actually see the very face of God. And there's so many things that we could go out around the room and say, what do we see when we see Jesus in the Gospels? But if I could say big picture, we see the condemnation of those who think that they can do it on their own, and grace and mercy to those who realize that they cannot. So where are you? Are you still in darkness, thinking that you can be righteous with God on your own, by your own account, by your own self-will, by your own efforts, your own track record? Or have you come to the point where you realize, oh my God, I need you. I need you. And has the light of this reality burst into the darkness of your mind and of your heart to bring forth the knowledge, the true heart of God that we see in the very face of Jesus. And when we believe, when we come to this realization of seeing the difficulty, the impossibility of us getting to God, going back to that imagery, because the light has shone in, and we now actually see the true light of God, who he is, because we see Jesus, and like this fire smoke illuminating, showing the pot of the smoking pot. We see in this very Jesus, we now can see the heart of the Father himself. And when we come to this realization that we are desperately in need of Jesus and of his light to dispel the darkness in our heart that we got from Adam, that we got from Eve, look at what happens. I know we walked through this in Peter, but I'm just going to remind us, look at this. He says, but you are a chosen race. This is post-salvation. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession. Look at this, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of what? Darkness and into his what? Marvelous light. Jesus is the light of the world. And he started it on day one of creation as a foreshadowing of what would happen the day Christmas 2,000 some years ago in some cave manger thing with animals and filth, darkness personified. But yet the birth of God in this world. Light shining in the darkest of places. And he says, you have been called out of darkness, just as his light burst forth on day one of creation, just as the light of the world burst into the darkness of this world in his birth in that manger in Bethlehem. When we place our faith and trust in Jesus, we are, let's use the word transferred. We are changed from this location of darkness, and we are transferred into the marvelous light. Who is the light of the world? His name is Jesus. Now look how Paul says it in Ephesians 5. This blows my socks off. Peter says that you were in darkness, now you are in what? Light. Now look how Peter puts it. He says, for at one time you were darkness. Not you were just in it, but you yourself, being a descendant of Adam, you actually were darkness. But now, look at this. Paul says, you are light. That's who you now are. And is that because of what you've done? What was Abraham doing over there? He was sleeping. Sleeping and believing. A believing sleep. That's a picture of a Christian. Believing rest. Resting in the promise of someone else. Resting in the work of someone else. Believing someone else's promise. But you are light. You were darkness, but now you actually are light. It's who you are now. And he goes on in Ephesians 5 to say what's the most proper thing for someone who is light to do? To walk as light. I mean, that's the most normal thing to do, for you to walk as this light in this darkness. Now that the light of life is now in you, let us now walk in this world as who we are, dispelling the darkness even what? Further. In the lives of our husbands, our wives, our co-workers, our neighbors, our friends. And lastly, I think there's one more verse. Yeah. I want to throw out. This is back to John. This is the same John who wrote the Gospel of John. This is not John the Baptist. This is the same John that wrote the Gospel of John that said, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. And he talks about that Jesus himself is the light, and in him was the light of life. And he who has the Son has this life, and he who does not have the Son does not have this life. Well, look at this. He says, John 1, 1 John 4:17. By this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment. See, before we keep reading, if we were to take a silent poll, what's it called? A silent poll? A secret poll, whatever. And I were to ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how scared are you for the day of judgment? 1 being not scared at all, 10 being I'm shaking in my boots. I would guess, I don't know each one of you, I guess most of us would be on the 5 to 10 side of that scale. I would guess. Because we're just so ingrained with this fear of God's judgment coming. But what John, I'll get him. What John says here is by this, and you got to look at the context, but he says, love is actually perfected in us. Love is actually bringing us to this point of maturity. The true love that the Father has towards us, towards the Son, towards us, is actually bringing us to a place of maturity. It's perfecting us. It's maturing us so that we may have confidence in the day of judgment. Because, how can we have confidence in the day of judgment? Because, look at this, as He is, so also are we in this world. As He is, so also are we now here in this world. So He is the light of the world. And in Him there is no what? Darkness. Guess what? In you, your heart. I'm not talking about the flesh. I'm not talking about the outer man. The outer man is still riddled with sin and death. The outer man will die. But I'm talking about, as Paul talks about, the new heart, the inner man. In you, you are the light. You have the light of Christ. You are the light of Christ in you by a new birth. And in you, there is, your new heart, there is no what? Darkness. For as He is, so are you now in this world. The question is, do you see it? Do you see the light of your new heart? Do you see the truth of what He has actually done, bringing you through death, where He became darkness, so that He could take your darkness, and into resurrected life, where His light is now your light. You were darkness, Paul says, but now you are what? Light. And as He is, so are you now here in this world. So what do we know about the Father? What do we know about the Son? That's what we know about you, about your new heart, your true identity. You see, Jesus didn't come to live this kind of cool moralistic life, to like kind of give us a pep talk to just live moralistic living. Jesus came to plunge the entire human race into death, to end what started in the garden, and to raise, as Paul calls it, a new what? A new creation. The old is gone, the new has come. You are a royal priesthood, a holy nation. You were in darkness, you are now in light. You were darkness, you are now light. And the love of God towards you is what is maturing you, so that at the very day of judgment you have confidence. Confidence in your flesh? Wrong. Confidence in your track record? Wrong. Confidence in who? One, Jesus Christ, who has done His work to make you as He is now in this world. So the question is, do you see it? The question is not, is it real? I mean, the scriptures are clear. The question is, are you willing to believe the truth about who you now are? Not what you see in the mirror, and not even what comes forth from you when things, remember that whole stepping on the dog, toy thing? When things go awry, look, some flesh can clearly come out. But by faith, are you willing to believe what God has called you to be? What God calls you now as His chosen royal priesthood, sons and daughters of light. Let's bow our heads and close our eyes. Oh, look, here's our thing. I'm sorry. The closing. Yeah, there it is. Whatever you call that thing. Jesus, the light of the world, became our darkness on the cross. We saw it. From noon to 3, darkness. So that we would be light with Him. And John says what? Like Him. The only way for you to get into God's heaven is for you to be just as good as God. And guess what? You have no chance doing that on your own. And so we must fling our hope, our faith, our trust upon someone what else? Upon another. And that's Jesus, who has done it for you. Our musicians are going to come up and we'll close this out with a song. If you would like to speak with a member of our prayer team for prayer over by the cross, feel free to do so. I'm going to pray for us. Father, we thank you so much for your loving kindness. We thank you so much that your mercy endures to 1,000 generations. Father, if it was up to us, we might be faithful for a few, and then we're out. Because the distractions of this world, the distractions of life, the distractions of marriage, of taxes, of customers, payroll, I mean, you name it, it just can become so much that distracts us and pulls us away from a dependency upon you. So if this was up to us, man, we would be toast. But your faithfulness endures. Your love is what's maturing us so that we have confidence that you have done a work so incredible in us. At the moment of our salvation, the old dead heart was cut out, crucified, and a brand new heart was raised. A new creation that is light. Just as you pulled the piece of Adam out of Adam and made Eve to be compatible with Adam, you have created us compatible with yourself through birth, through a new birth, to where we are compatible with you in the Spirit. And I pray that the light of the world would shine brightly in this moment into the minds of each one of these dear saints here today so that they see the truth. They see the truth, believe the truth, and live as light. Father, for those who do not trust you this morning, they're struggling, I pray, Father, that you would draw them unto yourself. Be the light to them so they see the impossibilities of them bringing any sort of glory to themselves, any sort of reconciliation between them and you, but that you have done it all, and that they transfer their trust from themselves to you. Father, we thank you for the celebration of Jesus and his love being the light of the world.
Would you stand to your feet, please?
The stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and ever pining till he appeared, and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder
Mosaic. Go out in peace this week. Go out in love. Be kind. Doesn't take much. Sometimes it takes a lot. God bless you guys. We'll see you back here next week. If you'd like prayer, the prayer team will be over on the side by the cross. We'll see you next Sunday.
All right, Mosaic Church, one more quick announcement just to be made. If you guys need to, Gail is having an open house today, so feel free to get in touch with Gail so you guys can get to that open house. All right?
That's true. There's going to be games and karaoke there. Christmas karaoke. It's just going to be a lot of fun.
Oh, boy.